Great.
On maths, my one legal delegate.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're ready for our second panel today on the topic of union growth. The focus of the union growth sub-plenary over the last few days has been on building union density from its current global level of around 7% to give the movement the strength to win the campaigns that members are telling us they want us to win. Our panel today, on my right, is Paul Goulter, who's a former head of the New Zealand Council of Trade Unions and is an advisor to the ITUC's new Organising Academy. To my left is Jyoti Makwan from India's Self-Employed Women's Association, and over to the left is Steve Cotton from the International Transport Federation. Welcome to the three of you. So look, let's start off this discussion with a bit of a hypothetical. You've each been given the job as a young shop steward to come into the union called the Earth and be given the job of going out and organising the entire planet. So Paul, where do you start? You need a mic as well.
In those circumstances, you take a deep breath, I suggest, first, before you do anything. But I think that the major point I want to make about that is I just don't think organising a factory by factory in that manner works any longer. Where I would start is, first of all, to start to see if there is a whole industry that needs to be organised, and after you've done that research, you should be able to identify your targets. The issue which this whole Congress brings to light is that can't just be done country by country any longer. It now needs to be done on the basis globally. And so this is where there's very important themes about unions globally now in different industries and sectors now need to join together in that research and in that mapping and identifying global targets and going after and organising global targets. That's the difference between what used to happen and what needs to happen now.
On that note, Stephen, the ITF has always been one of those organisations that's looked at the industry on a global level, probably because by its very nature it was touching up against different parts of the world. But tell us how, over the years, your organisation has dragged the minimum up through your activities.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks, Paul. It's a pleasure for us to be not listened to by anyone. So, other than that, I am Steve. No. I'm trying to drag them in, but for us in the ITF, we are the essence of a global union federation that's international. So we have aviation by association, but our very strong reputation is in the maritime world, which has been built over more than 50 years, where seafarers' unions understood that the movement of capital out of their national flags into what we call flags of convenience has been a way of avoiding tax, social responsibility, health and safety, all those cultures. So when we come back to your first question about what do you do as an individual, you have to understand the play. You have to understand what you're trying to achieve, what is a win. And for us in the ITF, even though we've been doing campaigning in the flag of convenience for, as I say, more than 60 years, we continue to assess what is relevant, who should be our allies, who should be our partners, and probably more now than ever, we've understood that research, understanding what capital is doing with their future of transport is the most important. So our challenge to all the people, our leaders that are here this week, is to think big. If you think about just the workplace, your particular issues, the overtime, the health and safety, you will not understand the big picture. Where do you fit in the global picture? So for us, we're lucky because it's very natural for seafarers' unions, dockers' unions now more than ever. Global network terminals have over 48% of the dockers' market, 4 big companies. So they understand that if you don't have an engagement with them, if you don't have a plan for them, you can't change what's happening in the waterfront in Brisbane. You can't change what's happening downtown Mumbai. But you've got to have a picture and a plan. So for us, it's understanding the big picture. It's union bosses thinking big, understanding their role, and then we will be there as a GUF trying to support them.
Well, one group of workers who we've learned have been thinking very big has been the Self-Employed Women's Association in India, not just working in a sector, but working in an unrecognised sector of one of the world's largest and growing economies. You hear these guys talking about global plans. How does that relate to the way that you've been organising at a very local level?
I mean, organizing at the local level is very important for us because that's a process where you have the workers in the movement who are not recognized, their work is not recognized. And when they come together and make a movement, so we do not want it to limit ourselves within one sector or within one country, but I think informal economy is growing worldwide, so this movement has to go forward globally.
And we were speaking before that the model that you've created for the informal sector in India, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about some of your wins, is now looking to people in other parts of the world are now looking towards your model to go into the informal sector there.
I think our experience is since we were registered in the year 1972 as a trade union of the women workers in the informal economy of our country. There is a strategy which we had to adopt because in the informal economy workers, every trade does not have a fixed employer-employee relationship. A street vendors who contribute to the economy does not have an employer. So you see there are so many trades which are organized under this informal economy. And when this all trades, I mean, you have to go issue-based. And you had to have a strategy of working them. So we have to organize them on one hand, since they have this whole issue of recognition of their being a worker and their contribution to the economy. So you have to start from creating an identity of this worker, specifically the women workers, to make them that they are the important worker and contributor. And secondly, then you have to really help them in terms of how do you build their collective strength to go on from that.
So, Paul, one of the key successes for SIWA is not just having a strategy, but that idea of building a sense of power amongst the members.
Yeah, I think that model's very interesting because I think it goes to one of the key challenges that we've got to face. And the way I characterise it, I talk about it, are we big U, unions, or are we about unionising? And if we are just solely about unions per se, that takes us down a different path than if we're about unionising. So your example, to me, is a perfect example of unionising. And what's happened in my experience, particularly in New Zealand in the bad years, is we focused too much just on unions and we lost the unionising dynamic. And unions stress, you know, how do we organise like the self-employed, the marginal in the economy, young workers, etc. But it's usually how do unions do that rather than what's the unionising impulse that we need to do. And I think we need to go back and examine what unionising looks like and then have unions as a vehicle to help do that. But our problem is not we don't have enough unions, is we don't have enough unionising going on. And this requires a major shift in thinking, and as a union secretary, that challenges me because I want to work and do what's best for my union. But the issue for the movement is what's best for unionising. And are we a unionising movement? Are we a movement of unions or a unionising movement? That's the test.
Does that distinction ring true with your seafarer members when you're working with a crew who are on a flag of convenience ship with no rights whatsoever, and you're going in there as the ITF, you know, to save the day?
Yeah, I mean, we take a slightly different approach. In the shipping industry, there's a lot of things that are wrong, and we have a very good international labour organisation, Maritime Labour Convention, which is probably of the best that the ILO has produced, and that was produced by partnership with employers and governments. So we've recognised we've got a moral responsibility, and if we start from that position, what is our moral responsibility? Then we try to change the face of trade unionism. You know, we're an international global union federation. Our members are union bosses, and sometimes union bosses don't want to hear what we have to say about what they have to do to be better. But that's okay, because we're taking that responsibility, we're taking that leadership. So for us, it is very much about if we carry on just servicing members, the elite where we have a collective bargaining agreement. We don't do anything to help the new businesses, the new modes of work, the new methods of work, precarious work. And it's clear to us that if you don't engage with the future, so young people are not under collective bargaining agreements because it's skilled, industrialised environments. So we have to find new ways of doing things. And it doesn't matter which part of transport. You know, we have Africa, India, bike transportation, carrying delivery, the whole movement of just-in-time process is just deregulated the whole norm as we saw it 20 years ago. And if we're not smart enough, and if they're not smart enough to get to grips with it, then we're going to miss and we're going to lose and we won't recover. So for me, it's about getting to issues, exactly as Jonty said, work-based issues, but in a global strategy.
Tell us how you organised your street vendors and the recent win you've had there, Jonty.
I mean, the street vendors are the part of the informal economy workers, and when we started organizing, because their workplace is the road where they sit and do the vending. So then you have to go to the roadside to organize them. And we have organized street vendors since almost 40 years now. So they were almost our first members at Seva whom we had organized. And we are fighting. I mean, their issue is that they need a space to do vending, a legal space where they can sit and vend. And that fight took 40 years for us to bring to recognize that they are the important workers and they need this space for their livelihoods. So now, after 40 years, we had to file a case. We had to lobby a lot in terms of giving recognition and fighting for their space. And now, just in March, we have a legislation for the street vendors in our country.
So as that long-running case was going through, did people automatically become attracted to the organisation and join, or was there a parallel strategy to get people to join the organisation?
I mean, two things are working together at Seva. One is that our strategy of organizing them on one hand, and second, also carrying out developmental activities for them together. So we do not just fight for wages and forget other issues what they face in life, which really has an impact on their employment. So you have to go together. So at Seva, we have a strategy of union and cooperative, so struggle and development together, and that has really worked. The second is our approach on organizing this worker, and we see four things has to go together, not one after one. One is organizing. That's a process where you have to invest a lot. We are very much a process oriented. So you invest in that process of organizing where you have the worker, where the worker themselves are involved in raising their issues, planning for the activities for them, implementing the activities, and also monitoring the activities which are meant for them. So organizing is very important. That has to go. Second is building capacity of these workers. So how do you build their capacity so that they are able to stand firm in this competitive market? Why not access to education to them? Why not access to infrastructure? Why not access to technology? Why not access to market, mainstream market? So that has to go together since you start them organizing. Third important is capital formation at the doorstep. So how do you help these workers who are earning such a low wages, and still you build a capital at their doorstep? And that is also one of those, because we believe that asset building in the name of women is the surest weapon of fighting poverty. And that we do it through access to financial services at the doorstep. And the fourth is social protection. We say at least minimum childcare, healthcare, housing, because in the informal economy, home-based workers, they work in their home. So home is their workplace. So housing is one of the social security needs, and then pension and insurance. So this minimum needs when this all four goes together, then that really helps the women workers to achieve full employment, which ensures work security, income security, food security, and social security.
How does that sort of strategy fit into the ITUC Organising Academy playbook, Paul?
Well, on first blush, it doesn't, because it's completely contrary to the way unions have tried to promote what they called organising, but in fact, it goes right to the heart of that unionising stuff that we have to do. And the sort of questions that I ask myself is what does unionising mean? Does it mean joining a union, or does it mean joining a collective, or does it mean joining a collective movement? You know, it can be a range of these things. In fact, where our union started, they started in the way that you did. In the mines, they were self-employed, on the waterfront, one by one, picked up one by one. That's how our union started, and somehow we made it a whole lot more complicated. And we need to, if we're going to get into these new parts of the economy, we need to crack those answers. Lots of unions are doing lots of good things. It's not enough any longer. And the issue is about power, and we need to understand what power means a lot more cogently than what we currently do, then move into unionising and organising.
So you're not really on about coming up with some sort of single organising model. It's more a way of thinking, really.
Yeah, organising lies at the heart of it, but the thinking, the context that surrounds that is now rapidly changing, particularly around globalising and precarious employment. Those two forces are driving a rethink. So we will always organise, well I hope we will, but the way we organise and what organising looks like will be different. If it's a major multinational, as Steve talked about, we do that through very high-level research and careful targeting, leveraging campaigns, but always on the ground. There'll be an organising on the ground movement. When we come to organise, for example, self-employed IT workers in an economy, that's going to be the way we do that. Will overlap that, but it should always be driven about why are we doing this? How is it going to build the power of the movement? That's the critical question, and that's why this conference is right. It's about building workers' power. It's about building workers' power, not building union power. Union power will follow workers being empowered, and that's a critical conceptual shift.
Steve, I'd ask you how your approaches have changed over time as the economy has become more global and capital more mobile.
Yeah, I think, again, both Paul and Jonty have said some very serious issues, because for me, trade union education, what it was 20 years ago, and there's some fantastic donor organisations here this week, but what is our expectation from education? If it's capacity building in the loosest sense, that's not good enough anymore. You have to understand what is the workplace issue, where does that workplace issue fit in the big picture, and we're challenging ourselves constantly as an organisation to look at what is education. Those donors have spent millions of dollars over the years, right? And at the moment, we're looking at ourselves saying we think we can challenge ourselves to give them a better product. And the product has to be similar to what we've said here, is what are the key issues that will drive our power? And, I've got an example, again, it comes from our friends in Australia. Historically, workers are considered to be the employed by somebody. So if I take truck drivers today, truck drivers have been subcontracted to be owner-operators. And many legislations globally, except if you're an owner-operator, you're part of management, so you can't be unionised. That doesn't help us with any of our issues. So, we're lucky we have a strong union in Australia called the Transport Workers, and they've come up with a whole method about impacting on the retail price. So they go to the retailers to create a price for the truck. So it doesn't matter whether you're a worker for a haulage company or you're the owner of the truck. You've got to find a method that will give us power to move or mobilise or, frankly, stop truck drivers when they've got an issue. And it's the same everywhere, because very clever capitalists have worked out defranchise their responsibility, subcontract, and if we can't come up with better uses of our approaches, we will not be able to impact on power. Now, I agree with Paul, and I have to be careful. I'm trying to be a general secretary of the ITF, and so our leaders vote for our leadership. But if we don't create the question, how do we mobilise mass membership? How do we understand the levers with the big market players? We won't deliver our future, and our future has to be about power.
Do you find yourself asking the same questions of your organisation?
I mean, two things which are very important, because I do agree that we have to organize the workers, but that has to be very much issue-based. And especially when it comes to the informal economy, there are so many trade. Up till now, if we see the data on what we are having, we have organized 1.93 million members from 122 trades. So there are different categories of the workers, and if you see in that categories, there are subcategories. And each trade has a different issue. So the overall strategy could be a struggle and development, but of course, then when it comes to the issues, you have to have different strategies of overcoming those issues. So I think that is very important. So I do agree that you have to work issue-based. Second, I do believe in building workers' power, because if anyone, we all workers at SEWA, we know we are SEWA. It's not someone giving and taking, but we have to own our union, and with our collective strength, we have to overcome the issues which we are facing.
We also touched a little bit on the merging of the political and the financial power from your members saying that the finance is important to unions now controlling massive pension funds. How does that financial element fit into the ability of unions to grow, Paul?
I think in modern-day union campaigning at a global and at a national level, it's absolutely critical because the sad story is workers' money is being turned and used against them, destroying jobs, destroying permanent work, destroying whole industries, contracting out and the like, and workers' money has been used to support that because of the way that the pension funds and everything have operated. Now, what's happened is people have said that's enough, and we need to move and utilise the leverage that that money provides to do a number of things. One is that money should now be targeted towards building sustainable jobs, particularly in infrastructure. That's the lifeblood of a modern economy, and that money should not be used in short-term private equity investments or in moving money around in short-term capital flows. It needs to be put in sustainable long-term investments. The second part is around our campaigning. Unfortunately, the power of modern corporates is such that just often on-the-ground organising will not be sufficient to break them, to ensure that union rights and workers' rights are protected. And so we now need to look at what's the leverage that we can apply to these companies through their investments and investment portfolios to help them behave like proper corporate citizens. This is not a big ask that we're doing here, and it's not acceptable that workers' money be used to attack workers' rights right throughout the world. So globally, and Steve will be able to talk more about this, the unions are saying we need to be smarter how we do this and ensure workers' money is used for the proper workers' interests, which will always be the best interests of the country at large, not the interests of private capital.
Do you think, Steve, that the pension funds and the financial triggers that unions have are too often seen as a tactic in a dispute rather than an actual asset that could be really used to drive a more progressive agenda? I know Jay Naidu yesterday was challenging unions to seize the pension funds and push for a transformation of the energy economy rather than sort of knocking on the door and saying, please exercise our shares in a more responsible way.
We have very strong views about workers' capital. In reality, it's a little bit like the class system. What is our expectation? We're going to leave smart buggers in the capital with the bankers to, fuck it up again? No, we've learned. And frankly, nothing has changed from the economic collapse. They're still now earning multi-million-dollar on our membership, bonuses on our money. And as we talked in the workshop yesterday, pensions, provident funds are deferred wages. Right? We will drive everyone mad in a collective bargaining environment to get the best out of the deal. The moment you put it in somebody else's pot, we start to think, oh, that's not our responsibility anymore. And we're saying, let's re-educate our leadership. Let's re-educate the trustees of pension funds, provident funds, to say, actually, the return, the management fees charged by bankers, investment bankers, to get you a zero return over the last 5 years is a disaster. I'm pretty sure, with the intelligence we have in the labour movement, that we can do a much better job of getting a good return. And we have to challenge legislation, we have to challenge governments, we have to challenge the bankers about what we're going to do with that money. And we have to tell people, you know, corporate social responsibility, what does that mean? It's just a bloody key, you know, what does it mean? It's just another tick in the box. It's no good for us. We need to be controlling that money, controlling our voice, and delivering real outcomes, right? And for us, that means, okay, we might have to learn more about money. We have to learn more about money markets. We have to learn more about capital structures. We have to learn more about how we provide a secure, socially responsible. How can we put our money into investments that don't have unionised labour? Whether you're building ports, hospitals, schools, all the things that society is about. And I think, Peter, you asked a question about trade unionism, right? On one level, it's not just CBAs. It's a political movement, and a political movement about social responsibility. And money is a fundamental part of that. And if we don't get to grips with understanding how we deal with money and how we challenge the world at large, we will not take our responsibility seriously.
How far away from financial power are your members, the sort of financial power that Steve and Paul are talking about, but also how much closer are they than they would be if they weren't organised through SEWA?
I mean, I would just say that the women in the informal economy, the member of SEWA, they have registered their own bank. We have a women's cooperative bank in our country for the women. So the member themselves, the worker themselves, they come together, contributed the share and have started the bank. It's now 40 years old bank, which is giving 100% dividend to the workers. So, we have seen that women are bankable. So that is our experience. Similarly, these women have come together, the rural women workers have come together to have their own marketing company because they produces a lot. They work hard, they produces on their small land, but then they don't have access to mainstream market. They have this all middlemen taking away all the profit from it. So these women, they come together and they have registered their own company of marketing their produces, agri-produces. So this is the way, the women have to be in the mainstream. They have shown that they could do that if they have an opportunity to do that. So I think organizing them and then create an opportunity where they could be in the mainstream.
And I understand your organisation is now so successful, you've had men attempting to join that you've had to turn away?
Yes, I think men they do say that they should have SEWA for men. So, but at SEWA what happens, because we organize only the women workers, of course we are a women's union, but our unit of work is family. So whenever the benefit of the women getting organizing goes to the family, then the men accept. They do not need a separate union for themselves. Like the street vendors legislation, it is also going to benefit all the male street vendors in our country. So it is only under the leadership of women, but our unit of work is family.
And just to sort of wrap up the discussion, we've got a couple more minutes, guys. It's a congress like this is all about sharing ideas, and I guess one of the real insights from this group is that there is it's not teaching a particular model, it's an organic process. What do you take away from these days that challenges your own thinking, Paul, after so many years trying to get it right?
A vast range of things. The conference is perfectly timed because I think it's, along with the rest of the global union leadership, it's capturing a moment in time where people have had enough of that bullshit that's gone on in the past and saying we're going to change this, we're going to lead it, we're going to make it different, we're going to make it better for workers. And this conference has captured that sense, but it's also helped people and helped me to understand the scope of what it is that we have to do and how we have to do it. And that means what are we going to look like in the future? We're going to have to act far more globally. And that's not just in the private sector, it's also in the public sector as well, because there tends to be an emphasis that this is just about private sector and big bad corporates. But in the public sector, that privatisation drive that's occurring in the public sector in health and education, right across the public sector, that can only increasingly be turned away through global action. And so both the public and the private sector are now being exposed to this, so we're going to have to be far more global. We're going to have to be far more sophisticated in how we do it, and we're going to have to be far more directed and focused through strategic planning, allocation of resources, allocation of leadership, on-the-ground delivery, as well as in the year leverage campaigns. What this conference is saying, we're up for that fight.
Jyoti, you've been at this conference doing a lot of teaching. Have you also learnt some things while you're here, and what do you take back with you?
I think we have learnt a lot from all other unions who are also organizing informal economy workers and formal economy workers in their own country. The strategies, the ways they are working. So there are so many best practices here we have heard on, and we really would like to take that. But the only thing is that how do we all come together at global level, focusing the informal economy workers and also focusing the women workers who plays an important role in this global economy.
And Steve, I know you've been taking an active role in the sub-plenaries. What have you taken out of the Congress?
Well, I kind of echo what Paul has said, that timing is everything, and we have to have the fundamentals right. We have to have a belief. We have to have the right leaders with the confidence to challenge the process, because trade unionism as we knew it is not enough to tackle the changing world. So we have to change ourselves, take the fight, and know that the fight's going to go on and on and on. And what I've seen this week is many, many delegates ready for that fight. So for me, let's keep the fight and win the fight.
Well, on that note, thank you, Steve, Jyoti and Paul, and thank you for being part of the Congress Live session.
Thank you.
Cheers, Peter.
Thank you.
Listening.
You forget it. You forget it. And
Great job.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Great story.